Assalamu alaikum and good greetings. So in this video we will be watching a video titled "How many generations before Christ?" Bible Contradiction number 2. So we have watched and react to Bible Contradiction number 1 in the previous video. This will be number 2. Without further ado, let's watch.
Supposed Bible contradiction: Matthew's genealogy versus Old Testament genealogies. Matthew 1:17 reads, "So all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to Christ, 14 generations." However, if you...
Okay, before that, so Matthew 1:17. So in the previous video we have watched, or we have take a look at Matthew, where the genealogy is. So 1:17, this one is it. So all the generation from Abraham to David were 14 generations, and from David to the deportation of Babylon 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to the Christ 14 generations. Okay. Now here is from Abraham, right? From Abraham to Jesus. Okay. So okay, 14. So what's the point?
You count the names Matthew lists, there is a problem. From Abraham to David there is 14, and then...
Okay, so we go to the list from Matthew, is it?
The next set there is 14, but in the third set there is only 13. Plus, Matthew skips over 3 generations in verse 8, another in verse 11, and several unknown between Salmon and Boaz in verse 5. Thus, the real total is over 45 generations from Abraham to Christ, not 42. So did Matthew make a mistake and contradict the genealogies of Kings and Chronicles? Well, this can be resolved by looking at a social concept of the biblical world with regards to numerology. In the modern West, numbers are only used for signifying a quantitative value, but in the biblical world, numbers could be used to signify other meanings and can be completely disassociated from their quantitative value. The Catholic historian Michael Hunt explains Matthew's use of cutting out generations and counting others twice is done on purpose because he is using numerology to put an important message in his genealogy we often miss in the West. Again, for us, numbers usually only refer to a numerical value, but for the ancient Jews, numbers could be used for a more significant message. In sacred scripture...
Now, before we go further, okay, things like this, right? Things like this, which I don't know. I cannot comment much because I don't know what is the actual context, etc. in the ancient Jews or Judea, etc. Right? But what I'm thinking is, because if this kind of discourse is existing and available within the Christian context, I find it puzzling when some Christian, when they look at some translation and of the Quran, and when they ask about something, and or they point to something as if they see something there, and when people try to explain that, okay, in Arabic, blah blah blah, right, they simply want to ignore that, or they do not want to, how to say, entertain the possibility or the existence of that discussion, right, within the context of the language of Arabic itself, what it means, etc. They just no, just take a look at the translation and they just want to go by it, right? So I find it interesting, especially if they accept this kind of discourse, right? How to explain what you see in the Bible based on how language is being used when it was written back then. So if you can accept this kind of discourse, it would be disingenuous, or it would be hypocritical. I'm not sure what's the correct word, but to then impose to others that you shouldn't discuss anything about, the original language, etc. Unless those kind of Christians are those who are even unaware of this kind of discourse, because they don't really study the Bible. Hence, whenever people want to discuss those kind of things, they say, yeah, you are cooking up something to justify something, right? So because normally I have come across a lot of those kind of comments. So I find it puzzling when we see even in the Bible there's this kind of discourse.
Numbers usually have more significance than their quantitative indicators. More often than not, even when a number is used to indicate a certain quantity, the individual number given may point beyond the numerical value to a symbolic significance. At other times, the number given is not to be taken literally and may represent an approximate value, a symbolic value, or may represent hyperbole. He lists examples like the creation week. It could just be divided symbolically into 7 days because 7 is a number of perfection. Man and beast are listed on day 6 because 6 is a number for beast and man. Another that ancient and modern scholars have pointed to is the 144,000 listed in Revelation 7. This is probably symbolic for the perfect redemption of man, not an actual future gathering. The number 666 for the beast in Revelation is symbolic as that is the gematria of Nero Caesar. So Matthew is also using numerology to give a message to his Jewish audience through his genealogy, which is why he is reorganizing the genealogy on purpose. He divides it into 3 sets of 14 by counting David twice, once before the kingdom was established and once after, 3 being another number of perfection and 14 being the number in gematria of King David. Add the
What's a gematria? Gematria of King David? I don't know.
3 together, you get 42, which is the number used for God's sovereign plan unfolding. Also, if you were to
What's that? What's
2, which is the number used for God's sovereign plan
what's that? What's God's sovereign plan unfolding? Never heard of that before.
unfolding. Also, if you were to count every name in the genealogy, the total would be 86. 8 is the number of salvation, 10 is the number of divine order, and 6 is the number of man. So in that, you have salvation times divine order through one man, who is the perfect heir to King David, which has been unfolded through the line of Abraham. Essentially, using numerology, that is what Matthew is saying, and why the genealogy was manipulated. Numerology was very important to the ancient Jews, and Matthew, wishing to impress his fellow Jewish readers, encoded a large amount into his gospel, especially in the opening. For a Jew of that time hearing this, there would have been no doubt as to who Matthew was claiming Jesus was. Matthew wasn't using numbers for their quantitative value, and that was perfectly acceptable to do in that culture. So this supposed contradiction can be explained by pointing to the cultural context. Matthew was intentionally reorganizing the data to put a much more important message in his genealogy, namely that from Abraham and through the line of David, God's divine plan is unfolded to bring forth the Messiah.
Okay, interesting stuff. I'm not sure what's that all about, because many of those I think it is explanation to Christians that already know those aspects, right? What's the number is, what's like 6 is beast and man or something. I don't even know what that is all about. So yeah, I'll just accept it as it is, I guess. There's nothing for me to comment there, and of course if you have anything to add or explain, feel free to do so. We'll just going on to the next Bible contradiction in the next video, inshallah. Thank you for watching. See you next time.